Good morning, Victoria.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
We can, yes, that's lovely.
Sometimes I have problems with my micro, so.
No, it's perfect. It's great.
Okay, great.
Eva, just give me the signal when you'd like me to start.
I think 1 or 2 more minutes tops and we can start.
Lovely, lovely.
Great.
Good, I think we'll kick off now. We have a good crowd in the room, so to speak. So warm welcome to all of you to this PERSIST webinar. My name's Nicola Bedlington, and I have the honour and pleasure of being your moderator during the next hour and a half. During this webinar, we will be sharing really important information and thoughts about the PERSIST project, which, as you all know, is all about patient-centred survivorship care plans after cancer treatments based on big data and artificial intelligence technologies. And today we're going to try and set this important project in the context of other major initiatives at European level, namely the Beating Cancer Plan and indeed the Cancer Mission. And we'll hear a little bit more about those two initiatives from a European Commission speaker a little later on in the session. A couple of small housekeeping rules to make sure we all get the most from this webinar. Please keep your microphones on mute unless you're posing a question or you're the presenter, of course. And when we get to the Q&A session, which we'll get towards the end of the webinar, please please press your virtual or raise your virtual hand if you'd like to pose a question, and you can pose it orally rather than using the chat. Please only use the chat if you want to add a link with interesting information for fellow participants. I'd like to make this as interactive as possible as a session. So, and of course, collect your questions during the course of the presentations you'll be hearing in the next hour or so. So without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to Victoria Gonzalez, who is the coordinator of the project, who will say a few words of welcome on behalf of the consortium. And Victoria is a senior researcher engineer at the organisation Gradient, who, as I say, is coordinating and driving the project forward. So over to you, Victoria, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Nicola. First of all, I would like to thank everyone here for joining us in this event. And now I would like to present a brief introduction to this project that began last year and that had managed to advance successfully despite the difficulties faced due to COVID-19 that we all know. Now I think that I cannot move. Okay. This is the general information of the project. Started last year, as I said, the 1st of January, and is going to end by February 2023. We are a global partnership, 12 partners in this project. from 10 different countries in Europe. And the project aims to solve unmet needs from patients, and also unmet needs from clinicians, because we realized both of these groups have some necessities that are not covered yet. So we are going to do this with a big data platform and also an artificial intelligence algorithms. Now, focusing on the patient unmet needs, we realized that after the treatment, during the follow-up, patients face the toxicity diseases, and also they need some psychological support because they suffer depression, anxiety, fear of recurrence. And we also know that they are not fully aware that changing their lifestyle could improve their life after treatment. So in Persist, we are going to provide them applications for the mobile phones, and also some devices that they are going to gather some health information, such as blood pressure or the heart rate. And regarding the unmet needs of professionals, they feel that they have not as good as desired coordination among the professionals from different specialties. They also detect that there should be individualized care plans for patients. And also they detect that there are some knowledge from specialties that should be shared among professionals. So for them, we are developing some clinicians applications in which they can access patient information in one place, and also they can use these applications to get some advices based on artificial intelligence models and some support to make a better follow-up for the patients. And apart from solving these unmet needs from professionals and the unmet needs from patients, Persist also aims to reduce the socioeconomic burden that cancer involves. Also, we want to make this protecting data from patients based on ethics and public regulation. So, going back a bit in the project itself, during the first year, we make research about the unmet needs from both groups and in which way we could solve those unmet needs. And after deciding which were the best ways, we started to develop the big data platform, and also some artificial intelligence components, and also some applications that would help both patients and clinicians. During the second year, this big data platform is enhanced, is make bigger, and also the number of components that we are developing. During this second year, also the clinical study started, just to prove that this big data platform, also the components, are right and are performing well. And during the third year, the big data platform could be increased more, and also the components, and the clinical study will keep on moving and progressing till the end, the project in 2023. So just to introduce that today the partner in charge, mainly in charge of the big data platform, Daedalus, is going to make a brief introduction to this big data platform, and also the partner who is leading the clinical study is going to make another brief introduction of both of this clinical study. And just to give you some links here, and to encourage you that you follow our project in the social media and the website that we have here. And hope that everything is more or less clear. If not, you can ask me now or maybe during the last part of the event, in which we are going to talk a bit more about this project. And I leave the floor to you again, Nicola.
Thank you so much, Victoria, for that very comprehensive overview of the PERSIST project and some of the milestones coming up in the next couple of years. That's really excellent. Just to let you all know, we will be circulating the slides after the meeting, so you'll be able to look at those links in a little bit more detail, and we'll be having the discussion a bit later on, so save up your questions for Victoria and she'll be ready to answer them. Thank you again, that's great. So now it gives me great pleasure to welcome Annika Novak from the European Commission. She's a policy officer at DG Santé. Lovely to see you again, Annika. That's great that you've managed to join us this morning. We recognise how tremendously busy you all are at the European Commission right now. And you're going to give us a little bit of an overview of two important initiatives that the Commission is driving forward. The European Beating Cancer Plan, first of all, and then the mission on cancer. So over to you, Annika.
Good morning, and thank you, Nicola. Maybe just a small correction. I'm no longer working for DG Santé. I have moved 2 years ago, but it's true I've worked in Santé for 15 years. I've joined DG Research and Innovation 2 years ago and started almost immediately to work on the cancer file. So that's why, in agreement with my colleagues in DG Santé, I give the presentation on the cancer plan, which is so closely linked with the mission on cancer that I think I can manage both. So maybe just to give you a very short brief background, and I will guide you through the cancer plan also briefly, because there's so many actions I can't go into the detail. Obviously, I will also tell you about the mission on cancer, and then how we see then the implementation also based on projects and evidence available. The cancer plan has been adopted this year in February, but cancer plan and the cancer mission, I will come to that later. The cancer mission is a new instrument under the New Horizon Europe program. So both initiatives has been developed in parallel, in close collaboration between the Commission services. And we will see then when it comes to the content, it is linked. They are similar actions, and it's really then when we now roll out both initiatives that we do that together, meaning we have a joint member states group. So we have joint health ministries and research ministries to discuss jointly the implementation. That's a novum. It means really that we plan and have these discussions together, but also take it out from both ministries, from both policy sides, to have the best implementation possible with a strong and-I element. So that's maybe, I leave it for the intro and we'll go on So the cancer plan, it's quite a comprehensive strategy, cross-policy approach. It has 10 flagship initiatives, which I will briefly present to you, and then 32 actions. So actions meaning small initiatives, big initiatives. It spans over the whole policy areas the Commission can offer to really have this cross-policy approach to move things on the ground, and obviously it covers then the whole cancer continuum. If we now go into the more details, I mean, the mission on cancer has pushed the plan or the discussions with Santé towards a very strong research and digital components. So the mission on cancer is also some of the recommendations part of the plan, and it really has helped shape the content. But then, as I said, also for the implementation, we will go hand in hand and make sure that also all the policy actions have the newest evidence, or we identify new need for evidence, that we have always make sure a close, innovative approach. The Mission on Cancer will then also contribute with the Horizon Europe partnerships under the Horizon Europe program. Maybe I move on. I mean, maybe just one word to the Knowledge Center, which will be launched this afternoon, as you probably know. So it's another good, strong collaboration we have with our colleagues from the Joint Research Center, who will today launch the new center. And this center will then coordinate, it's a new online platform, which will gather the evidence and research projects also. It will then coordinate all the research and evidence initiatives, monitor the cancer trends. It will also provide and update guidelines for cancer prevention, screening, diagnosis, and care. I will move on to the area of prevention. Here you also see there's a wide range of initiatives foreseen coming from the different DGs. So we have DG Employment for workers, DG Environment, also DG Move or EAC for healthy lifestyle issues. So you see it's really comprehensive also within one of the objectives of the cancer plan. And the flagship here is the vaccination against HPV. I move on then to the area of early detection. Here you also see the new cancer screening scheme. It's a package of elements. There we will update the council recommendations on screening, to update and possibly also to extend these to other cancer types. We have the cancer imaging initiatives, which was on the previous slide, and part of that package are the quality assurance schemes for certain cancer areas. Then I move on to diagnosis and treatment. This obviously is a very broad area, and it contains already several flagships. So flagships in the sense big initiatives, which will require, a lot of resources and also a lot of bringing things together. If you just take the first example, so the comprehensive cancer centers, here the idea is to have at least one center per member state, and that these centers then build a network. Yeah? And the idea is also to have, I think, 90% of patients having access to these centers by 25, I think. Here included is also what we call the Uncanny U. It's an EU platform, which we have still to build, which will assemble lots of health and research data to give research a better opportunity to use data for the research to better understand cancer. Then in the area of quality of life, I think this is a kind of new area, that EU will launch some actions here in this regard. Again, it's not just about care, it's about also patient needs beyond the treatment. What are the difficulties once cured or living with cancer to enter the labor market or to re-enter the labor market? What about the financial services? Are there barriers we have to remove? So there are different aspects we want to bring together and address in various initiatives. One of the bigger, more digital elements here is also the European Patient Digital Center. That's also a recommendation which comes from the Cancer Mission, where we want patients to donate, voluntary to donate the data, but also to exchange and get information in return. That's a very broad of the concept, but these are very, very ambitious initiatives. So the final slide on the cancer plan is also throughout the cancer plan that inequality is an issue. I mean, inequality in access to prevention, inequalities in access to treatment. Here, one of the bigger initiatives will be a cancer inequalities registry, which we built also to assemble the data from across the countries, which will also then help to monitor the progress of the actions and hopefully reducing the inequalities within countries and across. I move on now a bit, but very briefly, on what does the EU research funding has bring. I mean, there has been investment since 2007 from the research programs of over 3.3 billion, let alone 1.7 billion from Horizon 2020 to cancer, R&I. So there is a variety of funding mechanisms also to address the different needs. There was a lot of collaborative research, frontiers research, public-private partnerships, like the IMI partnership, as you may know. Then we have coordination of national activities in international partnerships. And as you can see, I mean, the funding, it was always a comprehensive approach, so ranging from the better understanding of cancer initiation, progressing and resistance, to improving prevention, treatment, but also quality of life was already covered. And the cancer plan implementation will obviously based and benefit from the existing and also ongoing projects. And the mission, as the more research component, will also help to identify, is there need for new evidence to update screening guidelines, or, you know, is there still, I think, an area of understanding, there are still gaps of understanding how cancer developed. So it's the mission then to foster such a strategic I&I agenda, and also, I mean, to push and to move the implementation of the cancer plan forward. The next slide is just a snapshot from our big repository of projects we have. This is just specifically on lung cancer prevention. So we can just see, I mean, how many aspects have been addressed already in a given area, and which are the kind of projects we can then, you know, use as evidence support the cancer plan. There are some actions with regard to smoking. I will then move on to the missions. Probably not everybody is very familiar with the missions. It has started, I mean, that's part of the new Horizon Europe program, which has clearly set out what are the missions, what are, you know, the main characteristics of the mission. Again, it's a new approach under the Horizon Europe program, but it shouldn't be just about research, how we do research, how we, you know, plan the program and how we spend the money. What has been done is there have been in 5 areas. So not only cancer, there was also, or there is also a mission on soil health, on climate neutral and smart cities, on healthy oceans, and climate change. And for each of these mission areas, independent boards, I mean, independent experts has been established 2 years ago, who started working then in September 2019. And they were tasked to develop a real mission approach in that given area and to present recommendations, what needs to be changed, but not just in terms of kind of research, what is needed to address the cancer challenge, but what are infrastructures or approaches to policy? What could be make a real difference? So this is then the board, the cancer board, and all the other 4 came up with their recommendations and handed over them last year in September. So for the mission on cancer, just also to give you a brief snapshot, they concentrated the main objective by 2030, more than 3 million lives saved, and for those living longer and better. So they have identified the 5 intervention areas, which you can see overlaps very much with the scope of the cancer plan. But as I said, this process had started 2 years ago. They came with the recommendations last year in September. And these recommendations had already an impact on the content of the cancer plan. So DG Santé was always present at the board meetings to see what comes up, what kind of advice we can take immediately and place it into the cancer plan. So in total, they have 13 recommendations, which we have listed here, but I think it's difficult to read. But just to give you an idea, I mean, yes, they cover the main areas, but they have identified quite interesting elements. Dedicated digital infrastructures. One I had mentioned already, the UNCAN platform, so the data platform for researchers, but then also the digital center for patients. There was strong push also for the comprehensive cancer centers, which are included in the cancer plan. So the main bigger infrastructure recommendations are placed in the cancer plan, but also with regard to childhood cancer, it's reflected in the plan. So in rolling out the cancer plan itself foresees also role of the mission board to act as an advisory board and really to point, where the latest scientific updates, what is needed to roll out the various actions. Maybe just briefly, the mission, we're still expecting or waiting for a political validation by the commissioners before they can really go out into full implementation. And with that, I will finish my presentation, but I'm happy to ask to respond to your questions, in particular, how we see then the implementation of both instruments. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Annika. I understand you're able to stay for the debate towards the end of the session, so perhaps if people could save their questions for Annika and we can have that at the end of the session. I had a couple of thoughts actually. Given the topic of today's webinar, it would be lovely if you could contextualize what the PERSIST project is aiming to do and how that fits into both the cancer mission and the Beating Cancer Plan, the policy dimension and potentially the research dimension. That would be really interesting, I think, for participants in this webinar. So I'm giving you a little bit of a heads up with regard to that question that we'll talk about towards the end of the session. That's lovely. We now have a video statement from MEP Thomas Love, who is a big advocate within the European Parliament, does a huge amount of work on equity of access to healthcare, to quality healthcare as part of the interest group there. And he will make a statement from the perspective of an MEP with a lot of passion in health. Eva, can you help us get that video on the screen, please? Excellent, good.
I am very happy for the invitation by PERSIST Consortium to share a look beyond Europe's Beating Cancer Plan. To be clear, we need to build a reliable, secure and agile health data ecosystem. Furthermore, harmonization of GDPR interpretations, data standards and legislation of emerging technologies such as AI is imperative. Without clarity in governance, we risk impediments to citizens' trust and the deployment of new technologies. It is important to consolidate and secure a health data sharing infrastructure. Infrastructures enabling data exchange are key. Further increase efficacy in cancer treatment and follow-up by providing prediction models from big data that will support decision-making and contribute to optimal treatment decisions and the health status of survivors. Focus should be on the accessibility and the development of a bottom-up approach. Better management of the cancer treatment and the disease will result in an improvement of health and well-being of our citizens. That will also facilitate a faster integration into the labor market where applicable. With a strong network of data experts, which will create accessible and standardized toolboxes with the involvement of AI, will enhance efforts to transform our approach to beating cancer. Once again, I would like to thank the PERSIST Consortium on their work in creating better solutions for tomorrow and for raising awareness of this topic. We must work with you, the researchers, practitioners, citizens and developers on the ground to make sure the frameworks we draw up meet needs of the future. Thank you.
Great, so a really strong message from the European Parliament looking at the value, the real value of responsible health data sharing and also this quintessential dimension which is really trust amongst citizens, amongst public and about the idea of multi-stakeholder collaboration. And this leads us nicely to the next presentation, and it's my pleasure to introduce Rafael Perez Luna from Dedalus, and he will tell you a little bit more about his organization. And we're going to look in this presentation at some of the technical aspects of the PERSIST project and importantly why they will make a difference to both patients and healthcare practitioners at the end of the day. Rafael, a warm welcome to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nicola. So, yeah, let me guide you about this little introduction to the technical characteristics of the PERSIST platform, okay? What we have tried to call from challenges to innovation, trying to give you a global overview on what are the main issues that we are trying to solve from a technical point of view, and how the innovation has been selected as the driven mechanism to create all the platform and the components together. Okay. So what is the main problem or the main issue that we face whenever we try to enter into a healthcare organization or the healthcare world, when we try to analyze and get some information from the patient data? Main problem is that most of the sources of information are fragmented and are well, keep the data in an understandardized format. Most of the systems are private vendor systems, electronic health records, and the interoperability and data extraction from those systems is not standardized. So it is hard to get into any healthcare organization, take the data, make some analysis, and create some innovative features on that data. And one of the very, very important missing points that we have in a classical, let's say, information system or healthcare information system is the lack of patient-related data that we can use to contextualize the information and individualize the treatment for the patient. For this, what we are proposing in the PERSIST ecosystem and using the PERSIST Big Data platform that we are implemented and deployed as part of the project is to create a flexible mechanism that allows you to connect all these disparate data sources using a standardized formats, define a standard set for data exchange and codification, and enrich the data with some extra ontologies and categorizations for that data that allows the data science researchers to perform better work and to extract more value for the information that has been collected. One of the big points in the big data platform from the very beginning was to enable multi-layer security standard access to the information, keeping all the regulations, ethics, and guidelines that we defined as part of the initial steps of the projects in place, assuring that the patient has all the control on the data that is collected from their side and can have a full ownership on that data. And the other big point in the PERSIST big data configuration and architecture is to provide with some open data interfaces that allows you to extract the information in a common or standard format that any researcher can use for developing their data algorithms. Okay, we have selected FHIR, HL7 FHIR, as the standard canonical model of representation for the information inside the platform. And you know that, well, if you're working with the integration systems and so on, FHIR is an evolution that allows you to get more value from the data that you are exchanging. This platform in the end is just the glue that allows all the services, machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms to work together to provide with related information that would be later exploited by the patient engagement and clinician applications that in the end are the user interfaces for all the information flow and advanced services that we are hosting in the big data platform. Okay, but well, I will speak a little bit more about this in a moment. What are the most innovative features that we have used in PERSIST from a technical point of view? The first one is the creation of the patient engagement mobile application, what we call mHealth. This is the central point of access to patient's data for the patient. It allows him to track his daily tracking data, the heart rate, the blood pressure, but not only that. Okay, it's the input point, the main input point for collecting other data from the patient that has been not actively collected in the past. Okay, when we are speaking about data collection from a patient, we used to speak about wearables, okay, and a smartwatch, bracelets, or something like that that allows you to collect objective data. But the intention of PERSIST is not only to collect that objective data, but this subjective data about patient own perception. Okay, if it is sad or happy, or it is tired, this mood that is hard to detect or collect from an objective data, well, you can have audio and video elements that allows you to insert, let's say, that information into the platform to be later analyzed by the machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms. Another big innovative features is the liquid biopsy feature that we have introduced. This is the software for counting the circulating tumor cell in blood for the patients. Okay, this allows to have some measure of the well, recurrence maybe of the cancer in the patient without having to do any kind of procedure. It is just blood analysis. And when it comes to the more technological or machine learning, let's say, elements that we will use in the platform, there is a set of services that will help the clinical professionals to improve their work by analyzing both retrospective data from patients in the organizations that are part of the clinical study and using the very same data that we are collecting from the clinical study, prospective data from the current patients that are in the study. From that point of view, the intention of the algorithms that we are developing is to allow us to or provide some services for the doctors to early detect the possible patient trajectories that they may have when they have survived the cancer, using the contextual information from the patient, this history clinic information from the patient, and what we have learned from the historical data, okay, and to provide with a clinical decision support inference engine that uses the collected data in the clinical study with the machine learning algorithms to provide some other risk evaluations for the patients, or some suggestions on changes on the lifestyles, or well, anything that arises as an important topic that may improve the life of the patients in the study. I would like to share with you this little video, okay, when we are showing what is the what is the health application about, okay, and what are the wearables that we have, what that we are using to collect the data from the patient here. This is a bracelet that has been given to any of the patients that are part of the clinical study. The bracelet allows the patient to automatically track the blood pressure, the SpO2, the pulse rate, and so on. And the data that is collected into this bracelet is automatically pushed into the mobile application that the bracelet is connected to every 30 minutes. So we are continuously collecting objective data from the patients and storing that data into the big data platform. The patient can track all of this information directly on the mobile device and access to any of the measures that have been collected for the last day, week, or so. Okay. This is how the application looks like. The mobile phone is also one of the devices that have been given to the patients as part of the clinical study. And the interface for the application is internationalized, so any patient has the information in its own language, and there are a list of videos that allow you to query the information information that you have collected, connect to the bracelet, checks the status of the Bluetooth connection, release or attach to a new device, and in the end, anything that may help you to control all the data that is being collected automatically for you. Okay, as I said before, the mobile application is not only intended to collect this objective data, but to serve as a mechanism to collect the mood, the feelings of the patient, because it allows you to record some audio and video that will be later analyzed in the platform by machine learning and artificial intelligence services, and will extract that mood or that sentiment from the speech and the face gesture, and that information will be added as observations as along with the objective collected data. The mobile application also is a enter point for the virtual attendance using chatbots, embodied conversational agents. Okay, and in the end, it's just a representation of a human being that is able to interact with you and to chat with you. And the same as with the audio and video recordings, the information that we collect from that conversations based on questionnaires, standardized questionnaires, is incorporated into the big data platform. For the clinicians, and this slide is very similar to one that Vicky has shown before, we have a view when the clinician can check the basic demographic information about the patient, very little one because the patients in the clinical study are anonymized, and we are not collecting any data that allows the any person to identify the patient in the study, and they can access all the measures for the patients and have trending graphics and diagrams that allows them to check what is the evolution of the different measures of the patient during the study. In this application, in the clinical application, and the results of the clinical decision support services that are being underdeveloped, and the patient trajectories will be included to extend the information that the clinicians may use to control the patients in the study. Okay, and well, as a brief summary of all the benefits that we are aiming to obtain from PERSIST as main outcomes. The first one, I think, is that we are always following a patient-centered approach. We know that there is no one size fits all in when it comes to cancer treatment. We need to provide personalized care to the patient, individualized as much as possible, and this is what we are trying to do. We are trying to implement the concept of the liquid hospital, where the care goes with the patient and the patient does not need to move to the hospital for everything. And we are giving the patients some tools to analyze the lifestyle and try to improve the lifestyle, and to get some trending and visualization tools on the objective data that is collected from them. Okay, for the clinicians, the main outcomes that we are trying to get from the projects are the predicted patient trajectories, and I think this is one of the very important elements that may help in the early detection of new risk factors, for example, for the survivors, and to provide them with the targeted and individualized suggestions based on the current conditions of the patient and in its contextual data. And for the healthcare organizations, as a secondary objective, we are creating processes that allows you to collect data in a curated way and to follow some standardization processes that allows the data to be extracted and used for other purposes in the future. And this is very important because we are unlocking the power of a big data platform by creating a foundational configuration as part of the PERSIST project. And yeah, that's all from my side. So over to you again, Nicola. I think you're on mute, Nicola. Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, there was a problem with my mute button. So it was on and off and on and off. Great. Thank you so much, Rafael, for that excellent presentation, which really underlined some of the innovations that have been actually driven through the PERSIST project and the actual impact that this will have on patients, on clinicians and indeed healthcare organisations per se. And I'm sure that there are a number of questions coming up from the audience on this. So we'll now move then to the clinical part per se of PERSIST, and it's my pleasure to introduce Dina Bemmer from the Institute of Clinical and Preventive Medicines at the University of Latvia, who will actually explore with us some clinical studies undertaken in the framework of the PERSIST project, and again the impact on patients and healthcare professionals, clinicians, community. Please, Dina, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. I hope you can hear me. Okay.
Your voice is a little low actually for the moment.
Try to change something now. Okay.
A little better, yes. If you could speak loudly into the microphone, that would be marvelous.
Or maybe like this one.
Great, excellent. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I'm gonna briefly introduce the clinical study done in the PERSIST. And so, as you have heard from Victoria and also Annika, the cancer patients after treatment have some unmet needs. For example, they fear of cancer recurrence and second diseases, and they sometimes experience nutritional disorders or some psychological distress, and etc. And that's why we thought that we can help them with improving the follow-up after treatment. And we picked the breast and colorectal cancer survivors because those cancer types have higher incidence and survival rates. So there are really large group of those survivors, and we can help them in that way. So PERSIST will offer the possibility of remote support and monitoring of the patients for the clinicians. And in this multi-center clinical study, the patient gets the device set, the mobile phone and the bracelet, as you can see in the picture. They're all here. And the smart bracelet will measure the objective markers, for example, vital signs that could be like heart rate or blood pressure, etc. And also subjective markers, which are patients replying to prompts and questionnaires and etc. And from the other side, the oncologists will get the clinical decision support system, and they can personalize the treatment of the cancer patients, and so they can effectively manage the follow-up. So our hypothesis of the clinical study was that we can perform a comparison of the patient situation at the beginning and at the end of the intervention, and they will have the significantly increased self-efficiency after they will follow this mHealth Hub intervention. So in this multi-center clinical study happens in 4 countries, in Latvia, Belgium, Slovenia, and Spain, in 4 different hospitals. University of Latvia is collaborating with Riga East Clinical University Hospital. In Belgium, our partner is Center Hospital University de Liege. In Slovenia, University Medical Center Maribor. And in Spain, it's Surgus, which I don't risk to pronounce correctly. So the design of this multi-center clinical study was single case experimental prospective study where each individual serves as its own control group, with first measurements done before the intervention, then at the recruitment phase, and then after every 6 months until the end of the study, and that will be in the year 2022 at the October. So we have 4 subtasks in this clinical study. At first, to make the clinical study protocol and approve it, then recruit the patients, do the data collection and usability study, and then, of course, get to the full clinical validations. So what have we done so far? We have made this clinical study protocol, which also includes patients' informed consent, and it's some kind of consensus between all of the partners, because we are in 4 countries. We have to follow the rules of national legislations and also, of course, the European Union. So we have gotten ethical committee approval in all countries, and also in 2 countries there's specific hospital ethics and medical committee approval needed. We got those one too, and then we can start to do the clinical trial with the training materials for the patient recruitment. Considering that at that time it was really difficult situation with COVID-19, and the patients in some countries couldn't even come to the hospitals to visit. So we made those materials not only in print form, but in PDFs, in like making video, like you previously Rafael showed you. So we can send them to patients via email, and they can get to know the study and understand what is what, and then ask questions later. And of course, we made training materials for clinical research staff and did the training of them, because they have to explain everything to patients. They have to understand what's going to happen and how it's going to happen. And afterwards, we did the patient recruitment. And this is the criteria we used for the selection of the patients. We needed, altogether we have, and we needed 80 patients who have survived breast cancer and 80 patients who have survived colorectal cancer. Each country has 40 patients, and in 2 countries, 80 individuals altogether will go like a separate division of this clinical trial. From them, we will get the blood samples and do the CDC counting test, previously mentioned by Rafael. So in each group of breast cancer and in colorectal cancer, we have 2 subgroups. One is for chemotherapy received patients, and one is for non-chemotherapy received patients. So other general inclusion criteria was that patients are 18 to 75 years old, they have stable situation, and they are after the cancer treatment 3 to 24 months, and they have a life expectancy of more than 2 years by the opinion of a researcher or the doctor, and they can of course understand and follow up our instructions, and they promise that they will come to follow-up visits, and of course they understand enough of technology, and they have a good cover to internet connection, so we can get the data from the bracelets to the phones and from the phones to our servers. We excluded the patients who have life expectancy less than 1 year, who had a diagnosis of dementia, and who are some kind of dependent from other people and could not follow the healthy lifestyle by their own only, and who also we excluded the patients with major depression and those who are on psychiatric medication. So what we have done so far, we have recruited patients, they have signed the consent form, and they have filled 2 questionnaires, PAM and case cancer questionnaires. So we know their situation at the beginning of the study. So the patients have received the device set, and they have started to use the system. And when they are using the system, they are sending us the questions or some feedback of all this, so we can constantly improve this. And meanwhile, the doctors, as also Rafael said, can follow to the patients via mHealth Clinicians app, and they can see, for example, patient's heart rate or steps or any other thing they are interested that we are gathering right now from the patient's bracelet. So what we are expecting of this clinical study altogether is that we hope that patients will have increased self-efficacy, so that means that they will get some kind of protective effect of the perceived risk of recurrence, and we will measure this by mentioned case cancer questionnaire and SSS self-scale, and also we hope the patient will have reduced psychological stress, and that will mean that he will have the better management of his disease, and so it's better health and well-being, and they can faster get back to the labor market, which is also important. And of course, we hope that by providing the prediction models from the big data, that will help doctors and support their decision making, and so it will also positively affect the patient's quality of life and the state of survivors. And of course, the long-term result would be to reduce the socioeconomic burden related to cancer survivors' care. And also in the other branch of the clinical study about circulating tumor cells in blood, we hope to get evidence that it's important to do this as the part of the follow-up for the cancer patient treatment. And I think that's mainly all I wanted to briefly introduce you about the clinical trial. So if you have any questions, you can ask now, or maybe at the separate section with for the questions and answers. Nicola, I'll give the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Dina, for that very, very clear overview of what you're doing and how you're approaching these multi-country clinical trials, clinical studies. Excellent. So let's open up the floor then and see if there are any questions from the participants who've been listening quietly so far. And as I said, if you could raise your virtual hand if you'd like to take the floor and pose your question, now's the time to do this. Any questions from anybody? I have a few myself, which I can perhaps kick off with. As I said earlier, Annika, it would be great to hear from you. You've listened carefully to the very good presentations that we've had this morning, and it would be wonderful to understand from you how you see PERSIST fitting into this wider picture of the cancer mission and the Beating Cancer initiative. And also a secondary question, I noted that you have a particular initiative on returning to work for cancer survivors, and obviously there is an element of that linked to this project, as we heard from Dina just before. It would be helpful to give a little bit more detail on that particular initiative if you have any further information on that. That would be lovely, Annika. So those are the two questions I would have for you. And take your time, we have plenty of time to have this discussion.
Yes, many thanks, and yes, and thanks for the presenters. Very interesting to see details of such a project. I had difficulties to say it fits in the specific action, since it's very has different elements which them fit to various actions. I mean, not just the digital elements and the data aspects. Obviously, the patient engagement, well, in the project, but then also, you know, later on with the applications to follow the aftercare or the process after the treatments. Data collection, obviously, specifically on lifestyle. I think that's very interesting. Also, then to see how to monitor the patients and how to help them, because that's one of the elements, I think, of the idea behind the Cancer Patient Digital Center, that they wouldn't just give the data, but they would also receive something in return. So in terms of recommendations for how they should, design their lifestyle, how they could keep in good health. Then the clinical decision support, obviously, is interesting, fitting in the more the diagnostic and treatment part. And then the better management of the impact of treatments. There probably you find less something in the cancer plan, but this is something that the cancer mission has picked on in terms of developing less invasive treatments, but also then to look at the medical impact after the treatments. So I can't say that's the way you fit in, but you would inform many of the actions, and I think that's really interesting to take that. Looking forward to the results then in 2023. Specifically, returning on work, that falls within the remit of our colleagues in DG Employment. So I know it's considered to revise, I think, the directive, but you see, I don't have any details to tell you. I think the thinking is more in terms of special leave of family members to support cancer patients, but I think it's not, fully clear how broadly they can extend support measures in this regard.
Okay, thank you very much, Annika. That was really, really helpful. Looking then back at some of the presentations, Dina, one question I also had for you was you talked about some of the complexities of recruitment, etc., in the COVID era. A lot of discussion right now is placed on diversity, and I just wondered how you've looked at the recruitment of patients for your clinical studies through the lens of diversity in all its guises. Was that something that you were able to explore given the other constraints?
Yeah, we try to, of course, look for the different patient groups, but it's kind of complicated. For example, in breast cancer group, because of the male patients really get the breast cancer rarer than the women. So, but we have different age groups, starting from even 30 years until up to that 75. But considering that COVID situation you mentioned before, we have countries who can make the groups for patients and they can recruit them and explain everything in the group. But for example, in Latvia, we use like one-on-one when doctor and nurse explains to the patient everything when he comes to the hospital. There we can't make more than 5 people in one room, so it's kind of a long process of all. But yeah, and I think each of the country maybe did something different, but altogether we have a diverse group of the patients, including different ages and both of the sexes. So it's kind of okay, I think so.
Great, thank you for that. Obviously, all of the panelists, all of the speakers have a high degree of expertise in this sphere, and I just wanted to ask any of you what other examples are available on how technologies can actually address the unmet needs of cancer survivor patients. So beyond this really important project, what other examples, illustrations do you have from your world with regard to how technology can really help and make a difference? Any thoughts on that?
Well, Nicola,
Victoria.
yeah, we know that there are some applications, for example, for help during the liquid biopsy to detect some kind of CPC cells that, I mean, the cells, tumor cells that are circulating through blood in your organism. And well, there are some applications to help on that task. And also last year, I think it was no, 2 years ago, in 2019, the French National Authority for Health gave a favorable opinion about one application, Move Care, if I'm not wrong, is the name. Is an application for patients that are facing lung cancer, and different from PERSIST. PERSIST is mainly focused in breast and colorectal, but this application is for cancer, for lung cancer, and it also aims at giving some support to patients to avoid them to fear recurrence, and through this application, the artificial intelligence tries to track the recurrence, the relapse of cancer, also in some sense similar to PERSIST, but in PERSIST we aim also at solving psychological issues, also to improve lifestyle in patients, in cancer patients. So some sides in common with PERSIST, but in any case, for applications for cancer patients.
Thanks, Victoria. Anybody else would like to contribute? Rafael, please.
Yeah, well, technology is a very broader concept, and you may find a number of examples of this. There's been a lot of hype, let's say, on automated image analysis for cancer, automated machine learning algorithms that are able to analyze radiology images and provide some support to the clinicians about the positive or negative detection of cancer in those images. There's been also a number of initiatives that are trying to use technology to, let's say, break the organization barrier when it comes to the patient treatment with, well, one of the concepts that, for example, we are working in my company in Dedalus at the moment, the continuum of care, where the patient is not treated, let's say, from a episode of care point of view, but from a patient history point of view. You get data from the visit to the global practitioner or the general practitioner, then you may go into a specialist, then you may need some physiotherapy, you may get some nutrition orders or recommendations for you. And historically, in a classic healthcare architecture, this information is separated in different sites and it's hard to consume for the patient. You need to track them in paper, or you need to get some kind of guidelines in a book, something like that. What we are trying to do with the continuous care is to have a platform that allows you to have a linear view, longitudinal record, data record for all of your information that you can use to control all of your data. And this is partially similar to what we are proposing in PERSIST. This is one of the key concepts that we are trying to put in PERSIST when we decided to go or to offer our data platform as a support for the project.
I see. No, that makes a lot of sense, and I think these sister initiatives and how they actually fit together are really, really important. And Victoria, the psychological aspect, we've heard it throughout the session, is so critical for people coming out of cancer. So it's really interesting to hear how you're tackling that across the spectrum of the project. I will just open the floor again to see if any of the participants, who seem to be very quiet this morning, have any questions. Please raise your hand if I can see you, or your virtual hand, or add anything to the chat if you feel more comfortable doing that. In the meantime, I'll continue to pose some questions. We've heard a lot about patients and their needs, their unmet needs. But again, to all of the panelists, all of the speakers, how do you, within the PERSIST project, make sure that patients are really at the centre of everything you do, of all of the thinking that you have around the project's objectives and goals and ultimate outcomes? I'd just invite all of you perhaps to give a little bit of thought on that, and perhaps kick off with Victoria.
Well, in the project at the beginning, we started with a survey just to check how the patients feel. There was a small problem because we wanted to make the survey, let's say, face-to-face during the follow-up visits, but at that point the COVID started to increase. So in some hospitals, in some countries, we had to stop this survey, and then we decided to start with an online survey, so we could even check the feelings from people from a wider audience, let's say, and to know how they feel, what they think that the follow-ups could improve, these kind of things. So from the beginning, from the core of PERSIST, we start to track the the unmet needs of patient. And as I said during my presentation, starting from there, we began to make research to decide how to solve those unmet needs. And during the clinical study, of course, we are our intention, our goal is checking if what we are doing is what they need, and if they, for example, if they think that checking the blood pressure too often is a problem, is stressful, we are going to write down that and take a note for that. And in the next version of the application, it's just a toy example, but a plain one to explain how we are using our clinical study. If they think that we are asking them for too much information, of if they feel anxious about some gathered data, we are going to modify our applications in that sense. So from the beginning, we started to ask them what they think we should improve, what they think the follow-up is lacking at this moment. And from that, we are deploying things and asking them, do you think this is okay, or do you think it should be deleted or improved?
Great. Thank you for that, Victoria. Any additional comments from your side, Rafael, and your dimension of the project?
Yeah, well, I think that the most important comment or point is the one that Dina has remarked in the presentation she made. We are continuously getting feedback from patients and clinicians, and we are trying to incorporate those feedbacks into the applications that are being developed, mainly in the front user applications, the M-Clinician and the M-Health applications that are the ones that they are using to interact with the platform. But of course, anything that is collected from them in this one-to-one when they are in the consultation with the specialist is gathered, collected, and tried to be transposed into the user interface applications. The most important for us is to give the patients the most usable technology for that they can take or have to track their data and to understand what is being doing with that data. And well, this is the main intention of all of the work that we are doing.
Great. We have a question. What other functionalities do you think could be useful in the future in relation to your app?
Well, I think that one of the most important elements that we'll have is the possibility of connecting third-party or external companies' CDS services into the platform. That can augment the quality and the number of clinical decision support elements that the doctor can be shown in the M-Clinician application. The architecture is modular from its very core definition, and this means that well, not only modular, but we are using open data. As I said before, we are trying to use the FHIR standard as the canonical model representation for the data. This means that any company that is able to expose the service using FHIR standard, or that has some knowledge base that can be exported as a clinical decision support element, could be used in the platform directly using that module, or by using some adapters that we have taken into consideration in the architecture. One of the key elements of the architecture is the possibility of using some plugins that allows you to adapt the input and output data from and to the clinical decision support services. And this is isolated from the user interface in a sense that you don't need to change the user interface to collect new decision support for external services. We are doing that part of the work inside the platform.
Great, thank you for that. Moving back to the patient's perspective, Dina, again in the context beyond your clinical studies and some of the other work you might be doing, you talked about self-management and independence of patients, patient empowerment. How could we perhaps better involve patients, empower patients in the cancer management process per se? Do you have any views on that?
Yeah, of course. The information is really available in these days, and I think the most important thing is to find trustful information. So in that way, I think our technology could help, because we have the knowledge bank section in the mHealth app, and if we are kind of together with specialists filtering this information who needs to be told to patients, and they can read this on our app, then it's some kind of trustful source of it. So I think it will help also in that kind of sense. But I see in the chat the question about the patients recruited and what is their feeling of being monitored by technology. And I wanted just to answer this, that of course, we have patients who are ready for this, and they are ready for that bracelet who they are going to wear all day long and all night. But some of them feel weird, especially in the when they need to record the diaries. But I think they're getting used to it. But regarding the questionnaires we are sending them, they have to ask, they have to answer. It's like kind of, we have to carefully manage this if it's not getting too much for them. So those patients we have recruited are ready to get to work together with technologies, and I understand them, as I'm wearing a smart bracelet myself, so I know how it feels like. But those who declined, yeah, it would probably be harder for them, but they have decided by themselves that they're not ready to participate.
Yeah. And then more generally, patients and clinicians, what would your thoughts be on how they're perceiving the use of artificial intelligence generally? Is there more acceptance and trust emerging? Obviously, your project is relatively new, but what's your perception on the actual views and feelings of patients and clinicians out there? Any comment? And also perhaps Annika, from some of the work that you're doing.
I think it's generally the same as I mentioned. Those who participate already embrace this artificial intelligence thing, but maybe some of other people are reserved and just want to wait and see. But if the results are good and if everything is working, maybe they can jump in. This is how I see it.
Sure. And this links in, I think, with a lot of the work and the thinking at European level in terms of building awareness, building trust on responsible data sharing, the role that artificial intelligence can play, not replacing that really quintessential human interaction between patients and their trusted healthcare professionals, but actually being an enormous support in terms of evidence-based decision making. I see you nodding there, Annika. Would you like to add anything to that?
Not much I can add on the patient's trust or reactions. But you can see at the European level that the discussions move forward. I mean, there's a new kind of digital agenda and a stronger focus even on artificial intelligence in general terms, not health specific. But this responds obviously to the need to have some sort of a framework and guarantees. And I mean, generally speaking, in health, when it comes more to the personal data, there we still have the quite prominent discussion on data protection. So that's, I mean, always brought forward by the certain member states. But I think it reflects that it still needs to be, a trustful dialogue to convince of. I mean, in the concrete application, then, I mean, not on the benefits. I think we will all agree, and also member states. But when it really then comes into the clinical practice and participation of patients, I think we still have a way to go.
Thank you for those insights, Annika. We're coming up to the end of the session, and Victoria will be saying a few words at the end. So maybe Dina or Rafael, do you have anything that you'd like to add to the conversation that we haven't really covered sufficiently during our session today? Any additional last-minute impulse thoughts that you'd like to share before we move towards the end of the session? First of all, Rafael, please go ahead.
Yeah, well, not too much to add, I think. Just to thank you all for attending this this presentation. I think it's a very interesting project, at least for me, and I think that this can really help patients to have a better quality of life after the cancer. And just as well, we are involved in this project. We are involved in some other projects with the European Commissions as a company, and I think that this is a path that we will follow in the future, probably because it's a big opportunity to develop new innovative features that, well, you usually cannot develop if you are just working for a client-based project. Okay, so from that point of view, very happy to be here to try to help and to attend this meeting. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Rafael, and also putting the emphasis on collaboration, deep collaboration, in order to move forward together on some of this very innovative work. Dina, anything to add from your side?
I just maybe I can briefly mention that actually we are not involving only the patients. We are also involving their family members, because their younger children or grandchildren, even, they're helping us to get them to know those technologies. So I hope we all together will make something that will work out and that will help them. And even the older generation will be able to understand these technologies, and I hope they can help them in their place of getting back to their health. And so this is like kind of, I wanted to mention briefly.
Excellent. This intergenerational solidarity and collaboration is also really important. That's great. Well, look, I think, and just checking out there, if there's any last questions, this is your final opportunity, but of course you can dialogue afterwards. Liliana, please, you'd like to pose a question, I guess.
Hello, everyone. It's not really a question. It was just a question that was just preempted by the answer, saying that this is a very great collaborative project intergenerationally, but also opens another opportunity for peer-to-peer support by patients who, when involved with other patients, feel empowered and have the potential to actually improve digital literacy, which is becoming a big topic, but not only in digital health digital space, but also on the other side of the people who are recipients of all these technologies. They need to be supported in raising their digital literacy, and I think that through these kind of projects and peer-to-peer support work, engaging patients but also relatives and carers is the way forward. So that we can feel as community that is helping others that may somehow be stranded. For example, I'm thinking of my grandma who has a cancer condition, and of course I should be able to be the bridge between her and such projects in future. Thank you.
Thank you, Lily. That's a great input. It's very important. So we've covered an awful lot of ground this morning. We kicked off with a great presentation from Victoria that really outlined what PERSIST is all about and how you've devoted the first year to really looking at the unmet needs of patients and clinicians, thinking about the toxicity aspects, the lifestyle aspects, and of course this psychological dimension that is so important in survivors' lives, thinking about how to move forward with some of the fragmentation in the system, the poor coordination, the lack of individual care plans, the absence of the right sort of specialists at the right time, and the socio-economic burden on individual patients and indeed on societies. I think it was really important to hear from Annika to really understand more profoundly how the synergies and symbiosis between the Beating Cancer Plan and the Cancer Mission, and what will be happening, a whole range of really important activities coming up over the next few years, which I'm sure participants will be keen to get involved in. And we had a lot of really good examples of work in various areas: HPV vaccination, the Cancer Diagnostic and Treatment for All initiative, Better Life for Cancer Patients, and also the angle on health inequalities and cancer inequalities across the board, which was really very, very important. The division of investment across the research space in cancer coming up was also really interesting, because it's covering so many different aspects of cancer, including, importantly, the quality of life piece, and really trying to get much more evidence to move forward. And what's great about what's happening within the Commission and the focus on cancer is there's going to be a huge repository of resources, of outputs, of outcomes of projects like PERSIST, which will help the intelligence and the evidence base to move forward. And the idea that the missions are really bold, inspirational ideas to move forward with a measurable goal, and that is a slightly different approach from previous Horizon initiatives in the past. So the goal is 3 million lives saved and better quality of life by the end of this mandate, which is very exciting and really interesting. And then we heard, I think, from Rafael, again, looking at fragmentation, lack of standards, absence of interoperability, how PERSIST is really trying to look at that through its ecosystem and provide the kind of glue that will make things work in the future. And what was really interesting, I think, for me, the thing that I took away was this idea of the liquid hospital, and that the patients will be actually in charge and will be able to navigate the system in a much more meaningful way for them, which was really important. And then Dina talking about the multi-centre clinical studies, some of the challenges around that, the focus on moving forward on that in order to be able to self-manage, patients to be able to self-manage, to empower patients, to try and alleviate some of the psychological stress, to foster integration in the labour market, and to ensure more effective treatments for patients living with cancer or in a survivor situation in the longer term, better outcomes for patients at the end of the day, and a much more seamless approach to all of this, also lifting some of the socioeconomic burdens. And then we've had, I think, a very interesting, at least it was interesting for me, discussion about different aspects of the project and how it will move forward. So with all of that in mind, I'd like to thank you all very much for your wonderful participation. I think we've all learned a great deal this morning. I know that all of the speakers will have their doors open if there are any further reflections or questions. I'd like to personally thank the team from the National Patient Organisation in Bulgaria, who's helped a great deal and in planning this session, and give the floor back to Victoria as the coordinator of the consortium for some more formal words of thanks and goodbye. Thank you very much.
Well, just to add, thank you to you, Nicola, for acting as a moderator this morning, and also thanks to Anika, who has joined today and also share all this morning with us, sharing her thoughts with us despite her busy agenda. And just well, to close this meeting, just to thank everyone who is joining, for supporting us, and I hope you have enjoyed this event, and that you have realized the PERSIST potential and how we can improve the life of cancer survivors. So stay in touch with us through social media and the website, and we will join in future meetings also. That's all for us.
Great. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.